Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, good morning, and good day from everybody and participants that joining in throughout all the world. I believe it's because this is a combination in between the European Union countries, member states, and Indonesia. Probably we have also audience joining us internationally or globally. Thank you for joining on the event today brought to you by Institute for Essential Services Reform with a webinar topic of green recovery in post-COVID-19. This is also part of the organization coming with the cooperation with the EU for Indonesia delegation that are happening throughout the October, starting 24th of October and until the 6th of November. And we're so very pleased to host you guys this afternoon today with a member of the panelists that already joining us online. Also would like to welcome all of the all the people and the participants joining throughout the YouTube channel, because we're also live broadcasting on YouTube, IESR Indonesia. My name is Ganda Baskara. I'm the communication coordinator for IESR. Before we're going to jump into the event today, allow me to take some time to remind you a little bit of the housekeeping rules for this roundtable discussions. This event we're going to be conducted fully in English. The interpreter services is available if you are joining through the Zoom application. We are really sorry if you're joining through the YouTube. Probably the interpreter services will not be available, but you can still watch us with the language of instruction today. If you would like to switch the language into Bahasa Indonesia, there will be an option on the bottom screen of the application. You can switch to Indonesia later on. But if there is one of the the panelists, we're going to speak in English. In Bahasa Indonesia. And for the international participant, if you would like to hear on the English interpretation, you can also switch through the English interpretation, as the interpretation will be available both two sides. Later on, we're also going to have a question and answer sessions that will be moderated by our moderator today. You are please allowed to ask questions to all our member panels today through the chat rooms that are available both in YouTube, also in a Zoom application. We will address your question as much as possible when the time is allowed. Please join our discussion with the hashtag of Climate Diplo or CWID through Instagram and through Twitter. And please don't forget to mention at IESR.id on Instagram or at IESR on Twitter. And also you can tag uni_Eropa or for the EU EU channel or handle on Twitter and also Instagram. So that's it, a little bit about the housekeeping rules for today. If there is a presentation materials or a PowerPoint material that will be shared by the end of the event later on the page when you do the registration. And if there is a journalist or media joining us, the media release or the press release is going to be delivered and distributed to you after the event. And if you would like to receive a copy, please do email us at iesr.or.id. So thank you very much again for joining us. We're going to be jump directly into the event today that will be moderated by our program manager for Sustainable Energy Access, Mbak Marlisia Citra Ningrum. Mbak Citra, the platform is yours. Have a great discussions.
Thank you, Ganda. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to our European counterparts. I would like to check my sound first. If you can hear my voice clearly, please indicate that in the comment box. Or if you cannot hear it, then please allow me to know so I can adjust my voice and all the equipments here. So is it all right? Okay, great. Thank you everyone for joining our webinar today entitled Green Recovery in Post-COVID-19. This is a virtual roundtable discussion in conjunction with the EU Climate Diplomacy Week 2020. So we thank European Union to feature us in this occasion that we will talk about green recovery specifically for the European countries and also for Indonesian context. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought many countries into economic downturn. And we also know that with economic downturn, usually there's a decrease in emission. But along with the economic recovery and the bounce back of every activities happening in every country, from past recession, we learned that there will be an increase in carbon dioxide emissions. So we will talk about how we can maintain the economic growth to recover from this economic crisis, but still hold our commitment to the climate and to maintain the economic growth as high as possible without breaking the environment. So today we will learn from several European countries on their approach to green economic recovery. As we know, the European Union has passed several plans for green economic recovery, and we will see in each European country's context how that will be translated into strategies and program, especially for countries with good renewable energy development, but also countries who still heavily dependent on fossil fuels. And we will also ask our Indonesian stakeholders, because we have yet to see any green packages, green stimulus packages in Indonesian economic packages. So we will ask our Indonesian stakeholder how we perceive this green recovery and what can we do as soon as possible to revive our economic growth, but still maintaining our commitment to save the environment. Today we will ask our Executive Director, Mr. Fabi Tumiwa from Institute for Essential Services Reform, to give opening remarks and to deliver some key messages that we want to discuss today. So Mr. Fabi, please.
Thank you, Chitra. Good afternoon to my Indonesian friends, and good morning to my European friends also. And thank you for all panelists for joining us today, deliver this webinar, this event. The COVID-19 is a global health crisis with devastating implication for a great many as people lose their life, and as we live through a spectrum of direct and indirect effects of lockdown and social distancing measures. Millions of people are affected, and the way people interact with each other have slightly changed since the pandemic began. As we can see today, we also now used to have webinar online meeting instead of face-to-face direct meeting. The COVID-19 pandemic is one of the most severe economic and energy shocks in modern history. And as the result of this pandemic, the IMF predicted that the global economy contracted 4.4% this year before hopefully rebounding to positive again next year. We are not really for sure how long this pandemic will be last. And the shock from the pandemic are leading to the reduction in emission globally. The result is an abrupt around 8.8% decrease in global CO2 emission in the first half of 2020 compared to the same period in 2019. And according to the new research from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, greenhouse gas emission from the energy sector have peaked, and stark drop in energy demand caused by the pandemic will remove 2.5 years worth of emission between now and 2050. However, we know it is just temporary as the implication of the economic downturn in many parts of the world. And to stay below, well below 2 degrees of global temperature rise, we would need to reduce emission by 6% every year, starting now, and to limit warming to the warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius as Paris Agreement target. Emission would have to fall by 10% per year. Global energy demand is expected to decline 5% this year, and global demand for oil is set to fall by 9% according to International Energy Agency. And we have seen that the demand for coal down around 6%. Only renewable energy is expected to gain positive growth. Indonesia alone has been experiencing a drop in coal export up to 11% till August this year compared to last year. This is equal to 2.2 billion loss in revenue. And the demand for coal in Indonesia market also fell around 20%. Actually, it is not all bad because the declining fossil fuel demand is actually an opportunity to accelerate energy transition if the country sees that way. And since the pandemic started, countries have made their response to fight economic impact of the pandemic. Short-term measure by mobilizing resources and stimulus to overcome immediate impact to the poor and business, saving job and strengthening capacity by improve health infrastructure to treat and cure people infected by the virus, suppress and eradicate the virus, as well as keep the economy afloat. Our generation is not only dealing with the pandemic, but also climate change. And we know that climate change could trigger the collapse of the entire ecosystem and amplify multiple crises. So it must be handled seriously. How we plan our economic recovery could make a different outcome on how we handle those challenges. If we plan our economic recovery wisely, we can tackle both health and climate crisis in tandem. We have a small opportunity to build back better and greener, to redesign our economy and our society. It is imperative to transform our energy system that is core to the modern economy, to shift away from fossil fuel to a clean and sustainable energy system. This will not only comply with Paris Agreement goal, but also will ensure security, reliability, and the participation of people that currently become the main consumers of the energy. Therefore, for all G20 economies, including Indonesia as one of the member, investing in workable and affordable so-called what we call Green New Deal is essential. The aim must be transition from fossil fuels to a low carbon economy through a public spending to support private sector green innovation and infrastructure, development of smart grid, rapid deployment of distributed energy resources, decarbonized transport system, enhanced deployment zero carbon fuel, enhanced energy efficient building and super efficient appliances, as well as develop smart and sustainable city. We can try to put a price on carbon and pollution and remove fossil fuel subsidy, which we think that this measure also can accelerate the transition and raise revenue for the necessary public investment and lower the overall cost of the green transition. In Indonesia context, this transition is not easy. As emerging economy, we are having multiple challenges that need to be prioritized by the government. But to be able to start the transition pathway, our government and stakeholders must overcome their mindset, their conventional wisdom that sees fossil fuel, particularly coal, as essential energy source for electricity and commodities as a source of revenue. Policymakers must aware, despite the abundant coal resources the country has expected to be mined in next 60 to 80 years based on the current resources we have, most of this coal must remain underground and should not be burned. And additionally, the policymaker must be aware of the reality that countries that currently import coal from Indonesia have been shifting their energy plan to move away from coal. Just in the past few weeks, we have heard that China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and Philippines actually has set their energy transition and moved toward zero emission by the mid of this century. Given this reason, a transition plan and a strategy of a new economy and industry to address the imminent decline of coal production and export are important. Our President Joko Widodo is one of the signatories of 2018 Solidarity and Just Transition, or Silesia Declaration. This declaration underscored the need to make the transition toward a low carbon and climate resilient economy in order to ensure high growth and sustainable development while maintaining a just transition of workforce. The spirit and features of this declaration has to be integrated into Indonesia economic and development strategy post-pandemic. For instance, we need to create a development and investment strategy to ensure coal province and region can have a new revenue stream and job creation from alternative economic activities that replace the fading extractive sector. Unfortunately, we do not have so much time left. We need to prepare and start now. The sharp decline of coal export could be seen sooner. In ISR prediction is less than 5 years. And before 2030, the new solar power and battery storage are cheaper to build and run than the new and old coal power plant. This also could give Indonesia utility a hard choice to continue operating coal power plant without raising tariff or getting large subsidy from the government if this current plan continue. Therefore, we suggest that a moratorium on the new coal plant must be seriously taken into account by our electricity planner and utility to avoid stranded assets that could cost taxpayer in this country in the near future. The decision we make today will define our future. Today in this webinar, we will learn from some perspective from Denmark, one of the EU country, as well as from the Indonesian government, the Coordinating Ministry of Maritime and Investment Affairs, about planning for economic recovery and while enhancing energy transition as well as mitigating greenhouse gases. We will learn from Poland, that is similar to Indonesia, rich in coal resources and has a strong plan to utilize coal for electricity, on how to plan a just energy transition. We also would like to hear review of G20 performance in providing green-related stimulus to battle the pandemic, and how the EU and Indonesia undertake responses, and how Indonesia can allocate funds to the COVID-19 recovery, highlighting energy sector improvement. We hope that all information and lessons learned in this event can be valuable for us, for Indonesian government, for our policymaker also, our planner, development planner, to shape the thinking toward green recovery in Indonesia. Thank you and have a nice discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fabi. Quite an opening that highlight what are we going to do today to discuss more on the green economic recovery, and especially the context in the European countries, and it's different to Indonesian context as well. So I will start this discussion by introducing you with all the panelists coming here today. First, I would like to say hi to Mr. Thomas Kapral Henriksen, the head of energy cooperation at the Embassy of Denmark to Indonesia. Hello, sir.
Hello, thank you for the invitation to participate in this roundtable.
Okay, great, good afternoon. And the second one was Mr. Ridaya Ser, PhD. I've met him before, the Deputy Director for Energy Program and Investment from the Office of Deputy Minister for Maritime Sovereignty and Energy, Coordinating Ministry for Maritime and Investment Affairs. Selamat siang, Pak. Okay, great. He's waving. And next, I would like to welcome Ms. Lydia Woital, Project Lead from Agora Energy Wende. Good morning.
Good morning and good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here.
Okay, great. Next is Ms. Katrina Laura Godinho, Project Coordinator from Climate Transparency. Good morning, Katrina.
Good morning and also good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here representing Climate Transparency today.
Okay, oh nice. And the last is Ms. Lourdes Sanchez, Senior Policy Advisor and Lead from the International Institute for Sustainable Development, or Iisd. Hello.
Hi, thank you very much. And same thing, it's a pleasure to be here representing the Iisd, and good afternoon and good morning to everyone.
Okay, great. So today we will talk about quite a wide range of aspects to be discussed, because we see many different representatives from different countries and also from different perspectives. So we will try to make this as engaging as possible. I will ask several questions to our panelists, and the participants are allowed to leave any comments or question in the chat box that occasionally I will open them and ask them to the panelists when necessary. So please drop your question or comments in the chat box, or you can also raise hand, and if we have time, we will call you out to ask your questions. So first, I will talk to Mr. Thomas Henriksen from Embassy of Denmark to Indonesia. So I'm sure that many European countries are delighted with the European Green Deal for the green economic recovery, but I want to ask your opinion on how the European Union approached the economic recovery with such heavy consideration on environmental impacts. So could you tell us a little bit about the stimulus packages for green recovery in the EU and particularly in Denmark?
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. I've prepared some slides with some illustrations, not that I have to run through all of these, but as some point, it is sometimes easier to talk with a few points from a few slides. And I would like to start on slide 20, if you could scroll until that one. That would be nice. Since we start with the EU, it's a little far down. Yeah, thank you. Just to say from the point that Fabi started with, that we need definitely some green ambitions in the world to keep on track on the agreed goals in the Paris Agreement. In the Paris Agreement, it was stated that it has to be a 1.5 degree scenario, or if not possible to reach 1.5 degree, then a 2 degree scenario. And basically, the European Green Deal aims to go towards that target. But we can also see what the current pledges under the current Paris Agreement, they're not sufficient to reach the 1.5 degree scenario. We are heading for a 2.6 to 3.2 degree scenario if we follow the pledges. And unfortunately, the current policies in the world today are not sufficient to reach the 2.6 to 3.2 scenario. Then we are in a scenario there is above 3.1 degree. So next slide 21, please, if you would scroll down. What the EU has initiated is that we basically need to step up. European Union also know that the current climate goal for 2030 is a 40% reduction compared to 1990 level. But at the moment, it's being negotiated how to step up. There's a possibility that the target will be 60% in 2030, which is just what the European Parliament has decided to work for. But there are still negotiations about this target. But also very important about these things is, of course, that renewable energy and energy efficiency policy will become very important. But it has to be a fair transition, just transition, leaving no one behind. That is also a target, meaning that the EU will focus on international partnerships and finance as a crucial element of this. Next slide, please, on 22. And here's also a slide I've taken from a presentation from the European Union. one mechanism to secure the just transition and get the sufficient investment in a Green Deal is to mobilize 1 trillion euro of investment during the next 10 years. And this is coming directly from European Union funding and climate measures, but it is also a very important thing that the EIB group will be a part of this, so that there will be loans to secure green investments. So this is really a huge thing in the European policy to secure green recovery after COVID-19 and to get investments into the area of green services, including the energy transition into green. And if I could just, if you could go to one of my very first slides, I could perhaps give a very brief explanation on how we follow up in Denmark on these things. To slide 2. Yeah. If you can make it full screen. In Denmark, we have not decided a new policy, basically based on COVID-19 and energy policy, but there was an energy policy that was quite ambitious, coming from a 2018 policy agreement and some ambitious targets in a climate law. So currently we are at a level in Denmark where 50% of our wind power, of our electricity come from wind power. And we have a target of 70% CO2 reduction in 2030 compared to 1990. Included in that target is 100% green electricity by 2030. And then we have a longer term target of 100% independence from fossil fuels by 2050. And the thing about these targets, they're very ambitious, but one way is to go to high shares of fluctuating renewable energy. And you can see we are already around 50%, but still maintaining security of supply is important and an affordable price. But it is possible. The prices are still at the same level they were before the green transition started in Denmark, and the security of supply is actually very high. We only have less than 20 minutes of interruptions for the average electricity consumer each year, meaning that we have security of supply close to 100%. So it is possible to do these things about renewable energy. And I think I would stop here for this part of the presentation, or for the answer to this question, just to say that the EU will focus on massive investment in renewable energy and other green sources, and so will Denmark in the years to come, as it is already in the green transition targets that we have set up for ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is very interesting, if I may say, because you mentioned that Denmark doesn't really have a green recovery package specifically, but because such an investment for green economy and for green transition has already been fostered in Denmark, are you saying that renewable energy and green economy is more resilient than fossil fuel economy, because then we don't really need the recovery per se, because it's already there?
Yeah, you could put it in that way. I would say the green energy is very resilient to changes in the circumstances and the fuel markets that has had high prices, then they have low prices and so on. The reason why Denmark started a green transition basically 40 years ago in around 1979 or 1980 was due to the oil prices. And then there was a lot of dependency on coal in between. And then it started out with some wind turbines during the late 1980s and 90s. But during the last 10 years, there has been a really fast development in the wind power in Denmark. And that is also to make ourselves less dependent on fuels that we need to buy. Because when you have established the wind power or the fuel-free renewable energy technologies, then you know the price, and you don't get surprised to changes in the world markets when the price go up on fuels, and they go up and down. Perhaps coal is cheap now due to the COVID-19, but I mean, just 1 year ago, coal prices were double of what they are now. And I know Indonesia had to use this domestic market obligation to keep electricity prices low by actually selling coal to domestic consumers below the world market price. So yes, green energy. There are some investments, there are some jobs in it, and it makes you less dependent on what happens in various fossil fuel markets. Of course, Indonesia is also an exporter of some fossil fuels, but still, when markets changes, PLN and independent power producers have to buy fuels for the fossil fuel technologies if they rely on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now, I think that's a very, very ideal scenario that we want to achieve as well, that with the green transition and the green economy, that we can achieve that energy sovereignty and also resilience from any crisis happening, including probably the pandemic situation itself. But now I would like to ask Lydia, I want to see the Poland experience in this, because correct me if I'm wrong, Poland has been a little bit slow in meeting the climate targets compared to other European counterparts. So could you tell me about Polish energy condition and how the Poland government see if the European Green Deal or the green recovery packages from the EU might help them to do the transition in Poland?
Yes. So thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here and share the Polish experiences, but also a personal pleasure to hear about the Solidarity and Just Transition Silesia Declaration, which was adopted at COP24. I was there, and I was definitely proud that Katowice, which is the center of coal center of Poland, is moving forward on that. So when I first started to work on climate energy issues in 2006, Poland was generating over 90% of its electricity from coal. In 2018, it was 78, in last year, 73.6, and that means some changes have already been taking place. And this change, I have no doubt, has been facilitated by the EU legislation requiring climate action, introduction of the EU emissions trading scheme, and also some other climate and energy targets, such as the binding renewable energy target. To this day, however, Poland leads in the EU's production and consumption of hard coal and has a significant share of lignite in its energy mix. So coal and lignite mining employs around 90,000 people directly, but the coal mining has been getting less cost efficient, and the fleet of coal power plants is aging. In most cases, refurbishing them would not make any economic sense whatsoever. So the other energy sources are natural gas, around 9% last year, and renewables, which are following the global trends and have started the renaissance and reached over 50% of the electricity generation by the end of last year. But this is actually not where the story is ending. It is actually just starting. And the change is coming from both the big energy and the prosumers. And an interesting factor is that prosumer action was triggered by, inter alia, the need for clean air. And this may come as a shocking fact to even some of my European colleagues, but almost 50% of Polish households are heated with solid fuels. That basically means coal. And this translates into Poles burning almost 90% of the coal burned in all EU households. So the heavy air pollution remains a problem in both urban and rural areas. However, and that's another interesting fact, once the government decided to support the thermal modernization and subsidize photovoltaics around 2 years ago, the society turned out to be extremely responsive, and the installed capacity of photovoltaics increased nearly twofold in just 1 year. So suddenly the decade-strong arguments that Poland is not having enough sun started to be irrelevant. Post noted the tangible benefits of not being afraid of the foreseeably increasing cost of electricity. And I think that was a big breakthrough on the prosumer side.
Okay, excuse me if I have very limited knowledge on the Polish economy, but I think coal also plays an important part in the economy. So how does the government see this conflict of interest, so to say, that because they still dependent of the coal for the economy and also for the energy sectors, and to make the hard decisions to transition to green economy and also still maintaining the economic growth itself?
I would say that coal has been in retreat for the last 2 decades. It was just not that visible, and there were still discussions with the miners on how to approach the issues. And then we came into the issue of the pandemic, which was, or actually still is, one of the key but not exclusive issues, which sped up the decisions of the changes needed in the energy sector and impacted both coal production and energy generation from coal. So, so when the last winter was very mild, actually, the demand for coal has been reduced and further degraded the profitability of coal-fired power generation and caused tensions between the miners and utilities. The utilities did not claim the contracted coal, and anyway, around 20% of the coal was imported, including some from Indonesia, by the way. It's not a large quantity, but it's still there. And as a result, we have oversupply of coal. Around 20 million tons of unused coal is currently stored by the mines and the utilities. This quality will probably increase. And when the COVID came and hit hard around March this year, it further reduced the need for electricity and hit the budgets of energy companies. And these companies, as I mentioned, were already struggling to remain competitive due to high share of coal assets. So the status quo was impossible to maintain. So this is how the government saw it. And the big energy companies, most of it which are state-controlled, decided they cannot actually go forward with coal-fired electricity production. So their CEOs, and that is also a development of the last few months, are arranging for separation of coal assets into a distinct entity to attract investors, because the investors will not engage with anything coal-related. Most of them actually also announced that they will be investing in green energy, and even the biggest ones will reach for climate, will be aiming for climate neutrality. And that was interesting enough, that was announced even before the government, which is still struggling with the official commitment to climate neutrality at the EU level. So we may see on one hand some kind of reluctance, but on the other hand, the government sees there is no turning back from green future. So in September this year, the Ministry of Climate has presented a draft energy strategy, assuming that by 2040, there will be only 11% of coal in the energy mix. Just to remind you, now it's around 73%. And this made the miners negotiate with the government on the timeline for the closure of the mines for the first time in the history. And for the first time in the history, they agreed that there is an end to coal and it will happen. So the coal economy is not about to be continued. This is acknowledged both by the private sector. This is acknowledged by the public sector. The way of presenting this recognition is still on various stages, but as far as I see it, and I've been in the business for 14 years now, the change is inevitable.
Okay. So this is the logical decision and also business decisions, because no investors want to invest in coal anymore. And we have seen that in Southeast Asia as well. There are increasing numbers of financial institutions no longer wants to involve in fossil fuel investment. And we will take that into our notes that perhaps Indonesia should also put a year to end our coal economy. Poland has put it at 2049. So maybe we can also make a year that we want to phase out our coal. Okay, thank you, Lydia. Next, I would like to ask Katrina from Climate Transparency, because Climate Transparency is reviewing all the G20 countries' progress, including its transition from fossil fuel-based to green economy system. So do you think that in general, the G20 countries are okay with the progress, including the one with the push for the green recovery post-pandemic? Or do you have some notes on that?
Thank you so much. Well, I think as has already been covered, especially by the introduction by Fabi, is that there's a lot of uncertainty at this moment, and it's very difficult to figure out what exactly the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic will be for G20's countries' progress to net zero emissions. What we can say, though, is ahead of the COVID-19 pandemic, so by the end of 2019, we were seeing a number of positive developments among the G20. Critically, the energy-related CO2 emissions decreased for the first time for a reason other than an external economic crisis. This was driven in a large part by a decrease in coal consumption and also a decrease in carbon intensity of G20 economy. So we were really starting to see climate policies working with a number of countries leading the way. It wasn't all good news at the end of 2019, and there were many gaps still, especially when it comes to the transport sector and industrial sector, where emissions were still growing considerably. Nonetheless, we could say 2019 was giving us some positive news and showing us where we needed to increase ambition and accelerate action. Now, of course, 2020 has also contributed to emissions reductions, but again, as we've already covered, this is not really good news, as it's come with devastating costs. And we are now again looking at economic recovery. And when we analyze the G20 economic recovery packages thus far, we're seeing a lot of support going to fossil fuels, including coal, and not nearly enough going to increasing resilience and taking more climate action. But even though that's, again, we're kind of going back and forth due to the uncertainty and things are still unfolding, we could say, and I think it's important to say and argue, that there is a green lining at this moment, which is that the COVID pandemic is putting governments in a position where they need to adjust policies and they need to adjust government expenditure, not only for immediate recovery, rescue responses, but also longer term recovery responses. And at this point, this is where we can see green recovery being a key opportunity to ensure that economies recover, jobs are taken care of, and employment is increased, as these are key areas that have been a cost of the current pandemic, but that it's done in a sustainable way and one that really increases the security and resilience of our future. I think some G20 countries, and this is tricky to say, but as you already mentioned, the report has been analyzing the COVID responses across countries. And over the last couple of months, we are seeing a greater and greater addition of green recovery measures, either through additional stimulus packages, like we've seen maybe in Germany and France, where there's a second stimulus that really focuses on green investments on renewable energy, on green hydrogen, on transport. And in other cases, we're also seeing some conditions being attached, some finances that were really dedicated to investment, going to green investment specifically. So we're starting to see that the recovery is becoming greener, and it can become greener. And I think that this is a key opportunity for the G20, and including for Indonesia to do to make the recovery green.
Do you think that the COVID-19 has somewhat pushed G20 countries to be more ambitious in their climate targets?
Well, I think that this is something that we're all perhaps hoping for, because the G20, I mean, it accounts for more than 3/4 of greenhouse gas emissions globally. So it's really, these 20 countries or 20 members account for a huge amount of emissions, and meeting Paris goals, meeting climate goals is not possible without really ambitious action in G20 countries. And for the last couple of years, or since the Paris Agreement, we have been left wanting when we're looking for this type of leadership. However, I think in 2019, we started sort of seeing this maybe a domino effect emerging when it came to net zero targets, with a number of countries first setting targets in June, and then again towards the end of the year. And 2020, even in amidst this pandemic, we have seen that domino effect continue with announcements from Japan, from Canada, from China. And I think that we can expect more, and we should hope for more, and we should push for more, because this is critical to sustainable development and sustainable recovery. And I would also say that while the 2050 or the net zero emission commitments by the middle of the century are really the signal that we need to see right now, it is also very important that G20 countries are updating their NDCs, their nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement in 2020 or latest 2021, to also set very clear sectoral targets and targets up to 2030, because ultimately that long-term ambition is meaningless unless we make the short-term decisions now to make the changes that we need for a climate resilient and low emissions development path.
Yeah, you mentioned NDC. That reminds me also to gear our voice toward Ministry of Environment and Forestry in Indonesia, who's in charge of the Indonesian NDC. If anyone is available here from the ministry, please kindly show us the update on NDC and how Indonesia will be more ambitious towards its climate target. Thank you for reminding us that. Katrina. Now I would like to ask Lourdes from Iisd, because Iisd has taken a closer look for stimulus packages in several countries, including Indonesia and also the EU. How do you see that our stimulus packages, is it geared towards green transition or not? I believe not. And how does it compare to other countries who've done so well on putting some green stimulus to recover the economy post-pandemic?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think that comes in the right moment, because it's a very good, I mean, it's very much linked to what Katrina was talking about. So, what I'm going to be talking basically is the work we have been doing at Iisd together with several other organizations, in order to track public money going to the energy sector as part of the the different recovery packages. So we look at how much is going into renewables, but also how much it's going to fossil fuels, and within the part of fossil fuels, how much it's, for example, conditional. That means that even if they are supporting the fossil fuel sector, fossil fuel production or consumption, there are some measures that imply that the companies or the organizations that are getting that money have to reduce their impact on climate, and in general, take decisions or take actions to green the sector. So You ask about Indonesia, and well, as you, I mean, also based on the previous presentation, so the situation is not as good as in other countries that we are looking at. So it's true that the country, well, so far they have committed around or almost $7 billion of quantified measures, and there are some measures actually that they have been designed to support renewable energy, like, for example, the solar energy program as part of the COVID-19 recovery that subsidizes rooftop solar plant installations in households. And also there are some other different fiscal, financial, and incentives to renewable energy projects. However, this, I mean, of the measures that we have quantified, these represent only 3% of the total public money that is going to energy as part of the COVID recovery package. So the rest, the 97% of the measures that we have quantified, they have actually gone to the unconditional bailouts to state-owned companies. So mostly to PLN, that has received around 47%, or is going, I mean, it has had committed 47% of the total funding. PT Pertamina is getting around 39%. And also the national airline Garuda Indonesia is getting around 8%. So those are the main buckets, and the total money, again, is like around $7 billion. So, you know, this is really a lot of money, and especially today, we know that this very difficult situation all over the world. COVID is affecting people, I mean, in terms of health, jobs, etc., and the economy. So when we think about all these large amounts of public money that are going to the different sectors, it's very important to keep in mind that this is the budgets, the public budgets are tight, and also they have to really focus on the most important things. And one of the things is to make sure that, you know, the public money that is going to the energy sector is helping to path a new way towards a more sustainable future. So renewables, green recovery, etc., is what has been mentioned by previous presenters, and the Build Back Better. So we're looking at the EU as well. I mean, in the EU, the situation is much, much better, as it was also presented before. So, I mean, looking at the countries in the EU that we have in this tracker, and also the EU per se, you know, what kind of measures or initiatives are implementing. We see that around 40% of investment is going to renewable energy. 13% to measures that are mixed. So they are kind of, I mean, it's not necessarily renewable energy, but neither fully fossil fuels. And then out of the rest of the public money that is going to fossil fuels, we've seen that 15% of the total is actually going to conditional measures. So that means fossil, for example, they bail out a car making company, but under the condition that they improve their they become carbon neutral, and also that they, for example, invest in cleaner fuels or reduce fuel consumption, etc. So this is what overall the EU countries and the EU are doing. And I can mention, for example, the example, I mean, the case of the EU's major commitment as an individual measure. That is basically funding around 10 billion euro to the, I mean, additional funding to the EU Innovation Fund that was already there. So this fund, for example, it focuses on energy-intensive industries, like, for example, steel, cement manufacturing. And the main objective is to encourage companies to invest in green technologies in order to entice carbon-heavy countries to decarbonize. So thinking mostly on biggest coal regions, like, well, Poland, we have the case, but also Germany. And what they do in this case is they share the risk of taking, you know, of investing in large and first of a kind projects that promote or that are linked to green recovery and Build Back Better. So another country that is doing very interesting things is France. So actually France has devoted almost 1/3 of the total budget for COVID recovery, which is euro 100 billion. To support the ecological transition. So, you know, it's around 30 billion, well, 30 billion euro that are going to support transition. And some of the specific measures they have under this package is, for example, the like almost $10 billion to green infrastructure and transportation and green transportation, or $7 billion on energy efficiency. So we see that there are countries that really do believe in the energy transition, and you know, believe means also that they think this is the sector to invest in, so that they can become they can come out of the crisis as world leader on new technologies. So they are using public money to boost this or to support this. But we also see, well, like the example of Poland, no, there are countries that are also putting money now into reducing their dependency on coal. So Germany is another example. They are also supporting coal phase out. So they're putting almost $5 billion to phase out lignite power in the country. So there are many options from European countries, and yeah, there could be a lot of interesting things for Indonesian to learn from.
Okay, great. People have been mentioning to me that it is not fair to compare European countries with Indonesia, but since Iisd has been taking a deeper look on Indonesian energy subsidies also, do you think that this priority of social protection and energy safety net is far more important than greening the recovery packages, so to say?
Yeah, very good question, and indeed, that's a very good point. So, I mean, I think one of the main things is the efficiency of the public resources, and of course, we understand that Indonesia is a fossil fuel producing country, and yeah, a lot of jobs and a lot of people depend on that, and the Indonesian economy as well. But as it was mentioned by some of the presenters before, I mean, the thing is this dependency on fossil fuels, something which is very volatile, and you know, there's the risk that the country, instead of making money out of that, is going to have to spend more money on that. I mean, subsidies in Indonesia, they are very high, and the question is, what does it mean? Could this money be better invested into something else? Could this money be put, for example, in social protection programs, as you were saying, like really targeting the people that really need the subsidy? And then when it comes to, for example, these bailouts that we are seeing today to PLN, Pertamina, etc., there's also the question on whether there should be some conditionality to that. We have seen that the EU has done it in several sectors. And here we see, for example, PLN is receiving, it's almost half of the total public money that is going to recovery packages. And we know that it has a strong dependency on coal. We know that it needs investment in, well, in the grid, for example, and there's a huge potential for renewables. So, you know, there could be also the opportunity to say, okay, this is this bailout money, but PLN has to commit to transition towards a green energy future.
Okay, yeah, that's one of the things that we also want to say to the government, that even if you give social protection form or bailout to state-owned companies, it should come with conditionalities so that we can start this green transition somewhere. Better now than late anyway. So thank you for that perspective. I would like to ask Pak Rida from Kemenkomarves. You have heard a lot about how European countries and also the analysis on Indonesia's stimulus packages is. Do you think that for now, as the government has set 175 trillion rupiah for a stimulus package, but only less than 3% of that going to green stimulus, do you see any remarks, I mean, intention from the government to improve it, or that the government still see this as a business as usual, that yeah, we should recover the economy, but without actually thinking about the climate targets and the environment?
Thank you. Again, I would like to repeat because I was muted earlier. Thank you for the invitation, and nice seeing everybody again, and some of you guys from the European countries. So back to the question. I believe the problem is not as simple as we want it to be, and we also, or maybe it is not fair if we discuss it as a simple problem. It is not there are so many variables involved. And as we know, Indonesia is a developing country, one of the developing countries, and we still have a lot to do, a lot to improve in our ways of doing businesses, and we still have a lot of regulations to fix, not to conflict each other, not to slow down our progresses. And one step is done with the omnibus law that just enacted, and even that is still we still have you guys can hear there's still demonstration around, and even behind me there's demonstration. I'm not even sure what they are today. So so again, it's not a simple problem. We cannot oversimplifying the solution. Indonesia has been blessed with so many or so much renewable energy resources. We are blessed with so much natural resources to be processed, and if we just so successful in coupling these two, we will just be the most successful country in the world. But that is not that simple, and we all know all political will involved. There are established businesses that like to keep things the way they were, even though we are not anymore the oil-rich countries. The strong businesses around that like to keep things the way they were. So, but the government we keep trying, and though Indonesia has been dealing with, for example, with solar energy since the late 70s. I also mentioned this in the previous webinar. We have not been seeing that much progress, but then again, suddenly, you know, for like a couple of like 20 or 30 years, there's not much progress. Then suddenly there's a 5 megawatts system installed, and even though that's still have trouble getting accepted in the grid, but it's still working. They're fixing it. They get it to work today, and then like 10 or more years from then, now suddenly we have a project in one of our hydro unit location in Cirata. We will have 145 megawatt to be installed over the water, and it was planned to be originally it was planned to be 200 megawatt and to be the largest over the water solar system in the world. But then things get slowed down, and businesses get many things happen. But then the project has managed to get things signed and ready to be built for 145 megawatts. So things like that happen. We have done things like the wind energy since 70s also. You know, nothing much happened. Suddenly in 2018 or 2017, we have 75 megawatt units installed, and then like a year or 2 years after that, we have another 70 megawatt system installed, and 2 sets from the same locations are coming. And the government tries, you know, and it's not an easy task. It is a price of having a democracy. It is a price of having a freedom in doing businesses. And although we don't follow the capitalism, but things evolve and things happens, and we try to regulate the government, trying to align the businesses. We're trying to take them to the certain direction, but it's not always an easy task. And though the ruling parties changes, and but the people in the technical ministries, they usually stays the same. Some of them have to follow new regulations. Some of them has to follow new decisions from the ruling parties or from the new presidents every time. And this is something that we need to focus on to be effective. We know that we do realize that we need to be effective in consuming our energy and in taking advantage of our renewable energy resources. We have identified that Indonesia is not the best country in terms of energy consumption or energy intensity, and also energy elasticity. We need to work on that. And as we do have a democracy in doing businesses, if we let things happen in a natural way, things should converge to the best way of doing businesses. And as Indonesia is an archipelagic country, so we have 17,000 plus islands. I mean, geographically, we are a challenged country to be electrified by oil. But how come the renewable energy is still not the strong? It doesn't have that strong of a hold in the generation of energy everywhere in all these tiny islands, for example. And so, but we are working on it. We put regulations in place, and we create incentives for businesses in doing business. We put people to school, learn things that we need to know, and things are happening slowly but surely, and hopefully we can keep this pace. And the better we are in formulating our regulation and what do we call that again? In maintaining our best practices. And I think the businesses will align themselves to the effective way of doing business, which is energy efficiency, renewable energy instead of energy efficiency where they are fit to produce. Like in the faraway islands, we have so many islands that are far away from the main islands, and they all have natural resources to contribute to our maritime economy. And that is just the best places to generate electricity and do the maritime industry with the fisheries, with the ecotourism, with the maritime marine tourism and things like that. So we are so rich with that kind of resources, and we're so rich of renewable energy resources to back up all this business. So it's about making things happen. It's not about how, it's about making things happen. We know how, but it's not always successful to let everybody go that particular path. So yeah, so it's all process, and many things are in the pipelines, and we are trying our best. And all collaboration from our European friends are always welcome. We do have many collaborations with the European counterparts, and we listen to their good experiences. We share things for us to move forward together, and so hopefully things will happen. And in terms of the COVID, this is kudos to IESR. Things are usually, we already know what to do. But whatever reasons we keep discussing things, one of the reasons is what to do post-COVID-19. So the more we discuss things, the more we keep our mind to it, and hopefully things will happening the way we want it to be. Thank you.
Okay. Because you mentioned that you mentioned repeatedly that there is suddenly growth in wind energy and also solar energy, but it's not actually suddenly. And Indonesia is being referred as not friendly to foreign investment or domestic investment for renewables. So how do you see that as a ministry of coordinating maritime and investment affairs from the term of investment, but also from, how to say that, our political policy framework and also the regulatory framework is not sufficient to attract more investment in renewable energy. So what's the strategy that the government has?
The yeah.
Image.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, what's the government's
Yeah.
to make
So,
renewable more?
like I said before, you will be surprised to see if you go through all the regulations. You'll be surprised of what are there in place. Even I have a research background. I did not believe earlier to look into. I don't believe in these regulations because many times they don't work, and but once you look at them, a lot of things are there. It's just not get done properly. So uh, uh, in terms of what you ask about our government or our system are not that friendly to the renewable energy, to some extent, I mentioned earlier that there were previous business that's been successfully established themselves early. They don't want to change things. They want to keep things the way they were. That is part of it. And also, the mindset that we need to move away from is that if we want to build renewable energy units in a big way, we need to move away from the mindset of surfing the load, because renewable energy, we have so many locations, all of our locations in Indonesia have good renewable energy potentials, but not all the locations have people in it to use and to consume the renewable energy. So and I mentioned this earlier, we can match renewable energy resources to back up the the natural resources at any locations. We can build businesses. We don't need to wait for the load. If we wait for the load, that's what happens. And a lot of other businesses have been waiting before these renewable energy investors are coming to join the party. And so move away from the mindset of selling the energy to the PLN, move away or start thinking, creating industry, maritime industry, fisheries industries in faraway places. The only challenge to that is the logistics routes. See, you can build anywhere with anything in Indonesia in terms of renewable energy to produce or to support maritime industry like marine tourism, ecotourism, and fisheries, fishing industries, or even aquaculture. So many potentials that have not been tapped. Oh, I can search and you'll be surprised. You would not believe how much potential that are not been, or there's just been passed. That potentially creating a good contribution to our economy. So we just need to be vigilant. We just need to discuss more, sit together, and there's always a way. So if one way is not working, don't keep pounding on it. Find another way. So back to your question, we are not unfriendly to the renewable energy. We are just not successful enough in letting this type of energy resources to dominate in our businesses. See.
Just your voice, I mean, your opinion that actually we are friendly with renewable energy is also translated into strategy in the ministry or in the government itself, especially for the economic recovery post COVID-19?
Again, I can't speak to the government as a whole, but I have not seen because we are so busy with our own duties. I have not been paying attention to what everybody is doing, and I don't believe, or I have not heard specific things to be done in terms of energy and businesses far out of what has been formulated earlier. So we still have a lot to do that we needed to do earlier. We still have a lot to complete, a lot of tasks to complete, a lot of targets to reach. And we still do have the 23% target of renewable energy in our energy mix into 2025. And we do have maritime economy to contribute to the whole GDP by as much as 9% in 2030. And further targets set for 2045. So targets are there, and these targets are not some magic number. They were calculated. The data are there to support where this would come from. So we just need to make it happen, because again, this is the price of having a democracy and doing business, and the strong businesses or more established businesses will, and they will hold the market to their advantage. And we just need to work on it. A lot of people believe things need to be changed, but how are we going to do it? Are we going to do it by one person at a time, or are we going to do it together? So kudos again to the IESR. This kind of discussion is good to have, and good to keep reminding us that there are things to be done, and there are good targets to reach, and we just need to work together.
Okay.
I guess that's
Okay.
it.
Thank you. I will stop you right there. It just seems to me that because you mentioned business, democracy, and etc., I think the main point here is to follow the money, at least to my opinion. And right now the money is going to the renewables. So if that's the perception from you or the ministry, then maybe we should turn our heads from fossil fuel based economy to the renewables, green economy per se, because that will be the future. Now,
If I
because we
could
have
mention, if I could mention 1 or 2 points, we have our big batteries industries coming, and who would be best to support that? Our renewable energy businesses. Who would use that? Or if we could use so much of the electric vehicle, and though we understand that, it's still not happening. See, go figure, right? So we just need to make things happen again. Thank you.
Okay, and we will wait to see the government make things happen, hopefully soon.
And things are in the pipelines, and it's just not always as easy as we discuss things to be.
Yeah, okay, great. I agree that it's not as simple or as easy what we discussed this here today, but we can always cultivate new ideas or lesson learned. So I would like to ask other panelists to give ideas or lesson learned, which develop context on how we can steer our recovery packages into greener stimulus, because there's also questions from in the chat box from Mr. Agusari. So what's the idea? So Indonesia could green its stimulus packages. So I would like to ask maybe from Thomas first.
Yes, thank you. I would. I think as you have, as Parida mentioned, it was very interesting to hear actually your presentation here. I think it's very important that you keep track on your political commitment for the 23% target, because international investors are looking at real policy and will in the long run monitor if you are achieving your target or follow the plan in that way, that you can achieve the best prices on renewable in the long run, since that they will minimize the risk premium when they go into the Indonesian market. So I'm very happy to
understand exactly your point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard it all the time, also from Energy Minister Arifin during this COVID-19, that it's very good that Indonesia reconfirmed the 23% target and commit to achieve this. I think this is it is so important. But what I also would like to perhaps the question here was. How could you make a stimulus package? I say, okay, stick to the 23%. That's important to achieve this target. On the other hand, I think it's a little between short-term and long-term economic stimulus packages. If you give on one hand tax rebates to fossil fuels, then to some extent you make the business case worse for the renewable energy at the same time. So it's a bit difficult to balance these two things when you are considering these things. Of course, I understand that you can give a stimulus package also for the fossil fuels, but then you some way harm the renewable energy industry at the same time. That is, of course, a little unfortunate. But one thing I perhaps would like to say is, I think that economic growth and emission reduction is possible at the same time. Could I get my slides on again? The ones I prepared, slide 6, please. This is the historical slide for Denmark, just to show that since 1990, it has been possible with 60% increase in GDP, while the emissions has been cut with 40%. And if you go to the next slide, slide 7, because I found this one very interesting, that it has actually also been investigated for Indonesia about the climate target and the economic growth. And this is the one from Bapenas on the low carbon development paths. And it actually shows that if you are having the business as usual case, and you have the various NDC targets, there's a moderate 29% NDC target, and there's a high 41% NDC target, and then actually in this calculation, there was also an NDC plus target with the highest climate ambitions. That's on the right side. But on the left side, you obviously see that the highest economic growth rates actually come together with the highest climate ambitions. So I guess it's because there's more job in the renewable energy, and there's more benefits from these sources. So that is why there is economic benefits, actually both on the short term and on the long term, to go into the most ambitious climate scenarios. And it is also becoming cheaper. If I can go to perhaps slide number 12 in this one. This is the historical development of the fossil fuels technologies and the renewable energy. international studies. And I think in an international perspective, the utility scale solar and the utility scale wind is far the cheapest. It's below gas, and it's below coal, and it's below nuclear now, due to the technology development. So I think the important thing is about the stimulus package to actually make investors confident in Indonesia, because I know some of the first projects might be a little above these international price levels in Indonesia, both for the solar and the wind. But I think you can quite fast gain speed on that and get to the international levels of these prices if you make it attractive for the international investors to go there. And if I may just jump to slide 10, then I would stop for now with just making one point more. If you could scroll up to slide 10 for me, please. Sorry, could you scroll up to slide 10? Okay, I can't see it.
Yeah, maybe the host is a little bit busy.
Okay, yeah. But the point about slide 10 would be actually, since the prices on renewables in many countries become lower than other countries, we have seen that the capacity factor has been the situation in India, for instance, where they have built a lot of renewable energy. Then the capacity on coal-fired capacity factor for coal-fired power plants reduce during some time. And therefore, the point is just, since the international prices on renewable comes down, I would strongly suggest you not to invest too much in coal-fired power plants now, since you could easily end up with the stranded assets as the economy will be better and better for renewables in the future. So it is a little dangerous to invest in coal-fired power plants that's supposed to last for 20 years or more if they're easily being competed out by photovoltaics or wind power within the next 10 years. So that would be my message for now. Thank you.
Okay. I quite agree that we should put a moratorium on coal power plants soon. Because otherwise we will have high carbon lock-in in the future, and also several stranded assets, which is not really cheap. And probably the government can listen to this, how we approach our energy access provisions without actually using the coal and other fossil fuels in Indonesia. And to the next, I would like to hear from Lydia, what's from the Polish experience. What's the boldest idea on how Indonesia can approach the stimulus packages to be more greener, and also to put more agenda on greening the energy system in Indonesia?
The boldest. There is so much going on right now that we will have to wait until we get the results of all the ideas that have been popping up recently. But if I were to structure these ideas, I would say one is something that the government can do. So first of all, set up a strategy aiming for concrete goals in concrete years, and that means coal phase out, but also investment. And when we talk about coal phase out, we always find that there will be, let's say, losers. There will be the areas which are coal intensive, carbon intensive, and these will need special care. So from Polish, but actually currently European perspective, the great way is to approach each of these regions individually to find the best way to transform the region. And in the European and Polish context, this is done through the territorial just transition plans, where both the government and the region are cooperating to find ideas for the transition of the region, that the coal and the high carbon intensive industry is not necessarily a part of this future. So that would be one thing that I would like to stress and show. The other is to reach outside of the government, reach to those who are actually counting on these jobs. And I would like to share a screen with you. Do you see it? Do you see my screen? Okay, so this is one of the ideas that has been pursued by by Agora's Polish partner. It's a think tank, Forum Energy, and they have cooperated with the largest employers organization to create a stimulus package, the energy boost for Poland. And they have calculated, they have quantified the win-win or no regret options for the modernization of the energy sector. So as you see, we have both the renovation of buildings, but also smart grids. This has been discussed between those two and then presented to the government as a way of including those actions into the recovery package. So these would be the two main things that I would recommend from the Polish perspective. As for the other ones, just to say, I have never seen such dynamics in the Polish energy transition as in the last 6 months. Can't say which ones will be effective right now. I'm sure that some of them will, and maybe even most. But this is going forward very quickly. And also, just to give you an example, only last week, one of the coal regions has decided to reach for climate neutrality by 2040. So not only phase out coal, but also to aim at climate neutrality. And this coal region is not dependent on the government. It's not a government-controlled energy company, but it's a private one, and they have decided to move ahead. That's showing the example for the other regions how they can do that. So one of the ideas is obviously they have prepared a big plan which will now be consulted with all the relevant actors in the area. But from what we already know, they are aiming to establish reskilling center for the workers, to invest heavily in renewable energy, to transform then also all the other sectors present in this area to reach for climate neutrality. So that can come from both the so the need and the structured intervention can come both from the government, but can also come from the private sector. And at some point they should and can cooperate together, like in the example that I'm now showing you. Thank you very much.
Okay, yes, the just transition concept is very important to take in mind, because as Lydia mentioned, to green economy, then there will be changes, especially to those regions who are heavily dependent on coal. And just last week we released our just transition study. I encourage you to take a look at them at IESR website, iesr.or.id, to see that. And it is particularly important in Indonesia because several coal provinces, over 70% of their domestic income are coming from coal. So we have to think carefully if we want to do the energy transition. How can we do it in a just way, thinking about creating more green jobs, and also to push the economy growing, or at least at their normal state, without actually losing something because we're moving from coal to renewable energy. And so I would like to ask Katrina, because it seems like Indonesia is lagging behind compared to other G20 countries in terms of its climate action and also the stimulus packages. So how do you see Indonesia could keep up with our G20 colleagues?
Thank you. Well, I think within the climate transparency report, we have identified 5 different principles that can be applied for making the economic recovery green. And I think these can apply for all countries, and specifically Indonesia when it's looking on how to improve in this area. The first one I would say is really making bailouts conditional on environmental performance, but also on transparency of releasing information and making sure that the way that business is run, especially state-owned enterprises, are transparent. I'm from South Africa, which is actually even more coal dependent than Indonesia, and I sympathize with the challenges of how do you deal with big state-owned enterprises, how do you support transitions, and how do you critically make sure that workers are being prepared so that it's not them that bears the cost of a transition that is poorly planned. So I think adding conditions for bailouts and potentially even including specific measures that focus on just transition. In South Africa, it is one of the countries that has started just transition processes, including engagement and dialogue processes with local coal communities. And I think that this is something that Indonesia can and should focus on now. So after conditional bailouts, one of the important areas to complement this action is to invest in sustainable infrastructure. So this is where Indonesia can focus in areas where it has a comparative advantage, which has already been pointed out is a lot of renewable energies technologies, including geothermal, which really benefits from government support when it comes to exploration, which makes it more affordable and attractive for international investment. I think that after that, when we're looking at a sustainable infrastructure investment, the next one that follows on is investment in the natural environment and nature-based solutions. I think across the world, we really are seeing how rural communities are being especially affected by the current crisis and are often more vulnerable to the future threats and risks of climate change. And when we look at nature-based solutions, such as creating jobs around afforestation, environmental protection, more sustainable agriculture, this is an area that right now can help with economic recovery and protecting the most vulnerable, and can also make sure that critical carbon sinks, especially forests, in which Indonesia has critical international resources in that area, are protected and maintained going forward. Then going back to kind of imagining how the world is going to be changing and how Indonesia will change as well, investing in education and training for renewable energy technologies, for decarbonized or decarbonizing transport sector, innovation in industry. These are all areas that we're seeing other G20 countries invest in, as this is a key opportunity really in this moment to pave a pathway where the whole population and all businesses and all areas are brought together through a sustainable transition, and prepare for the changes that we can expect to see. And then lastly, in the 5 principles, we kind of focus on the importance of policy and regulation. Again, from South Africa, I can sympathize with the challenges of having policies that may be very positive to renewable energy if you look in one area, and if you look in the other area, maybe it comes to bailouts for Eskom, the coal company, or well, our power company, which is essentially a coal company. We see that they don't really fit together. And not only is that very inefficient and it creates a lot of confusion and it really undermines business development when it comes to renewable energy, we also know that that kind of confusion doesn't benefit renewable energy, new technology. It benefits incumbents. And also it doesn't benefit the people, because there's a lot of transparency is lacking, and we can't see what's happening some of the time. We can't make sure that we are making the right decisions today. So I think Indonesia has a real opportunity now to align policies in different sectors, industry, energy, power, and make sure that they are all pulling in the same direction to create confidence for businesses, and also to create a very clear signal to the Indonesian population and businesses that the energy transition is happening, it's coming, it needs to happen, and it's going to be done in a way where government really takes a forward-looking and also progressive approach to a just and sustainable transition. So I think those are the 5 areas, although I know that there could be many more, but that's at least a starting point, I would say.
Okay, thank you. If this is like, if Indonesia is to date with someone, it's like sending mixed signal because the policy framework is not that clear, the investment environment also not that attractive, but hopefully we can try to polish ourselves to be more transparent and also more attractive in terms of transitioning to low carbon energy system. Thank you, Katrina. Now to Lourdes. Because you're familiar how public money is dispersed in Indonesia, particularly for energy sector, including for the subsidies and other things related. So how do you see that the public money on the stimulus packages can benefit Indonesian people, but also not harmful to the environment? So we can proudly say that, hey, we have something green in our stimulus packages.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, I think it's getting back a little bit what the other panelists have said, and also what was mentioned earlier in the presentation. So it's really about making the best use of those public resources and making sure that they support the Build Back Better, but also, of course, like the Indonesian people. And considering that, yeah, Indonesia, you know, has a group of people that will suffer if energy prices, for example, go up, but devoting measures for them specifically, so that yeah, they can still, you know, their economies can cope, but at the same time without incentivizing the use of fossil fuels with no need. I mean, I think overall, what the other panelists have shown is that the technology and the financials are there for new technologies. So that means, you know, that affects obviously the people, because if renewable energy is cheaper than coal, obviously electricity tariffs, you know, could be lower. Now, obviously, if that doesn't happen, I mean, there are many things, no, that unfortunately, well, many challenges that Indonesia has to overcome so that they can really integrate, you know, more cheaper renewables and yeah, in general, no, have a less fossil fuel dependent economy. And I think that should be one of the you know, priorities of all this COVID recovery funding. So really make sure that the environment is there, so that investors want to come and invest in cheaper renewables. Also that the grid for PLN, for example, allows for more renewables, so that the system is there. And it's been mentioned several times about the high dependency on coal, and also there are studies that say that the 35 gigawatt plan also is too much, especially if we consider today's situation, you know, when demand has gone down, as I was mentioning in the beginning. So there's a need to really look at all this in perspective. And yeah, since the things are there, it's just the need is to fix the environment and make it sure that it's enabling more renewables. And in general, I mean, it's really a matter of economics. So if renewable energy, you know, if Indonesia can produce cheap renewable energy, that will translate into PLN financials, and people would see that also in the electricity tariffs, and same with the other fossil fuels.
Are you optimistic that we can do that soon?
I mean, the 20% target is there for 2025, if I'm not mistaken. So that's in 5 years from now. I mean, I think one has to be quite optimistic, no, to you know, I mean, I think 2025, well, still 5 years to go. We don't know what's going to happen, no? But there's also a need to be realistic. And in any case, what it's important is that you know, the intention is there, the intention has to be maintained, and the best that the Indonesian government can do is done. I think those are the most important things.
Okay, thank you, Lourdes. So, Pak Rida, you have heard several ideas on how to green Indonesia's energy system and also the economy, but also on the stimulus packages. Do you think that some of them could be implemented or being adopted by the government?
Yeah, let me start by saying we make fun of ourselves as those who are very good in making committees and making plannings, but things keep not happening. You know, so with that said, we do have so many things in place to do. We have been discussing a lot of possible things to do. but we just need to look back at what's been discussed before and what's been studied before. And again, I will say you'll be surprised what you will find. And people like our President Joko Widodo and our coordinating minister here, Pak Luhut, these are the kind of people who are very persuasive in getting people in line to push to get their policy done. And we have seen that, like things that I mentioned earlier. Suddenly we have 75 megawatts here and there, and 145 megawatt solar in one place, and more are coming. And so if we keep talking about packages, I can say been there, done that. Do we need to do more? This is as the examples that we've seen has been successful in recent days. Let's do it. Just do it, and stop planning. Stop making too shiny plans and things like that, and just figure out what is possible to be done successfully. And again, I can say one example. If getting renewable energy built through PLN is hard, the regulations to build industrial estate supported by renewable energy within its own fence, regulations is there. You could do that. And it's just about making or sitting together and really think of what exactly to do and how to do it. Options are there, studies been there, data are there, statistics are there, and we just need to be careful and not keep doing what have not been successful.
But to be honest, Parida, we have yet to see significant progress in terms of what you have said. You said the regulation is there, and we should not continue doing what we have been doing before, but not successfully.
I'm not saying we have done. The government has done everything they need to do. No, I'm saying it is all possible to do. It's just again, this is the Katrina has been putting it in very eloquent words, in nice sentences. My language is a street language. I don't have a very polished vocabularies to deliver these things, but this is about making things optimal. Indonesia is not very competitive in terms of their industry right now, in terms of selling their industry in the world stage. And if we want move from there, we just do business as usual. And ways are there, there are so many things to do. I'm not saying we have done our job, don't bother us. No, this is everybody needs to get involved on this.
Okay.
Like I said, regulations are there. It is possible to do it. Let's see. Let's see how for us to be possible to. I mean, how can we make things happen? That's the only way that I left to do. And because I mentioned potentials, we have unlimited potential, and energy is everywhere. Renewable energy. Think about this. For you guys that are familiar with our energy system, Java is an island with so many mountains. So we're talking about hydropower. Java is one of the best places to build hydro generations in Indonesia. But let's count how many hydro units compared to coal units are built in Java. And Kalimantan and Sumatra are coal-rich islands. How many coal units are built for industry there? And Kalimantan, I think, compared to Sumatra, Kalimantan may be richer in coal than Sumatra. How come Kalimantan is the least developed? See, this thing has been discussed way back, but things still keep not happening.
Are you
See,
saying
this,
that we should build coal plant outside Java?
I'm sorry, say it again. You're breaking
Are
out.
you saying build coal power plant more outside Java?
No, I'm saying we need to be optimal. I'm saying we need to optimize. Where this scheme that we have now is we inherited this from the old regime, where we still have lots of we claim we have a lot of oils, and we built diesel unit everywhere in the country, especially for the far away island and the hard to reach areas. So it's not optimal anymore at these days, and we need to change that. And if we need to produce or build some industries in these areas, we need to replace the expensive diesel with renewable energy, the local energy sources. I used to tell my students, I also teach in some universities, I used to teach them, and I always tell my students, diesel in Indonesia with 17,000 islands is diesel riding in diesel, so at least double the cost when you go all the way to the faraway islands.
Agree.
So when you use renewable energy, it's a local source. It doesn't incur delivery charge or the delivery cost. It is sustainable, and you just need to make things work, make a good design, and calculate your costs carefully. You should be successful, and don't forget to create your logistic chain. So getting your products to your location, the products to your location doesn't have to be so expensive. And this is all an optimization problem, a cost minimization problem. And we can list all that we have. We can set all the conditions, and we should be able to come up with one very good solution. And one task left for us to do is to make that possible, to make that happen. So it's not an easy task. Indonesia is a huge country. It's the fourth largest population. You can imagine how many kind of business is done, how many groups of people are there to benefit from all the business, and how many have been successful, and how many of them seen the other people on the other side as the enemy of their businesses. So things could get hard very quickly in Indonesia. So don't surprise why things have not been happening that easily, even though points are made, and it is clear that renewable energy is the best answer in some areas in Indonesia, but it still keep not happening so far. So we need to find good solution. We need good social engineering to to make things happen. And this is all mixed up with all kinds of variables. It is not. I think the problem we have so far, when we talk about energy, we just look at the energy variables. When we talk about economy, we just look at the economic variables. We need to look at all the variables and how they're intermingled in all this, in the big objective function that we have. So it's a very interesting, it's a very interesting problem to solve. All people from all disciplines can do this, can get involved and put their hands on it. And if we're going to be successful, we need to work together, and we need to align our objectives together. So I guess that's not an easy thing to do. So government is working on it. A lot of people understand what to do, and we're not always successful in doing what we wanted to do. So trying, and the more we work together, the more we discuss things, COVID-19 or whatever the the milestone is today, let's talk about it. As the more we talk about it, the more we stay in line in reaching these targets. I think probably the most I could say. Thank you.
Thank you, Parida, for that remarks. And because it's already 5, I would also like to wrap up this discussion anyway. So based on our discussion today, I think that Indonesia still has a lot of homework and potential to improve the recovery packages and also its transitions towards low carbon economy and energy systems. And lesson learned from several European countries and also from the European Union and also from G20 countries are very valuable to us to actually translate that into more contextual strategy for our transition, with also considering the just transition system. We cannot forget that there will be people who are impacted, business will be impacted because of the transition, and the just transition concept is very important to consider in pushing for energy transition in Indonesia. I would like to say thank you for our panelists today, Mr. Thomas, Lydia, Katrina, Lourdes, and also Parida, for allowing us to ask you difficult questions today and allowing us to borrow your brain a little bit. I think we can summarize this discussion into several points or ideas for green recovery, and we can send it to Parida and his team at Ministry, coordinating Ministry for Maritime and Investment Affairs, and perhaps we can see something being adopted, hopefully. And I would like also to thank everyone coming to this webinar and also asking several questions and giving comments. We are sorry that we cannot accommodate all the questions and comments, but if you still have any doubts or questions, please mention our social media accounts or go to our website and we will try to answer your questions. And before we close this webinar, I would like to ask everyone to take a picture together. I heard that there is a photographer in session, so maybe we can get a good angle of our webinar today. Ganda, could you please help me to?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu sekalian yang masih bergabung di dalam aplikasi Zoom. Jika berkenan, silahkan mengaktifkan kameranya, webcamnya. Kita akan mengambil sedikit dokumentasi kenang-kenangan karena juga akan ada tim dari Kedutaan Uni Eropa di sini yang bergabung dan mengambil foto untuk dokumentasi. Silahkan. So please bear with us. All right. I think that will be all. Tim dari fotografer boleh silahkan langsung memotret. Okay, now we're gonna take the first part. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Oh, there is someone. Oh, hi, Alexandra. Thank you. Great. Awesome. I think we capture all. Thanks. All right, that will be all. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Institute for Essential Services Reform, we thank you all for all the participation. The presentation that will be presented today will be available after the event soon on the page of iesr.org.id/kegiatan or the event page that you are registered on today's event. Stay tuned on the other event of the EU Climate Diplomacy Week that will be still happening until the 6th of November. My name is Ganda, and thank you, and we're signing off from the event. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Parida.
Thank you.